Well, thank you, John Erbey from Roivios, CEO at Roivios. Thank you for joining Data Nerds in the OR podcast. And this is a special one. We're at LSI in Dana Point. It's the third day. So I want to thank you very much for joining us on this episode. And could you introduce yourself and especially the technology you're bringing to market with Roivios and what the mission vision is and a little bit about your company?
Absolutely. First off, thank you. This is a pleasure. LSI is always a great setting and great to have this conversation. Roivios is developing a renal assist device. So it's a technology that thought very differently of how the kidneys actually work. So we apply a mild suction into the collecting system of the kidney. That force is distributed up through each of the million nephrons. That reestablishes filtration. And with that comes all the magic that the kidney enables. So it's a catheter-based system. And we've been at it for almost 10 years now. And we're venturing into our pivotal trial, which is cardiac surgery patients with renal impairment, with the intent of a label that is sustain or enhance renal function, truly changing the way the world thinks about kidney disease.
Yeah, and we've talked about this. I can relate. When I was a clinician, I used to do these ridiculously huge hernia repairs, abdominal wall reconstruction, and some of these patients literally had their intestines below their knee. And we had to figure out a way to reconstruct the abdomen and get everything back inside the abdominal cavity. And that put a lot of pressure on the organs inside the abdominal cavity. And then you have edema. So in the first 48 hours after these major reconstructions, we always had to worry about the kidney shutting down. As you know, that's the first organ system to shut down. And what could we do about that? Almost nothing. We could try to restrict fluids, but you don't want to restrict fluids too much. Yeah, cross your fingers and then pray and then basically go, oh, well, at least we have dialysis. But as you know, and what the value proposition of your technology is, that's a very expensive thing, prolongs the hospital stay, prolongs the ICU stay. So I can really relate to the value of what you're bringing. So thank you. I wish it didn't take 10 years. So we have started a partnership between Roivios and Care Syntax, and it's really all around the ability to get data that helps support your value proposition. And we kind of wrap it around your IDE study and get data that's not part of the protocol, but is hopefully very important in the value proposition as you come to market and commercialize your technology. Maybe talk about what you saw as far as the value for your company to partner with Care Syntax around this kind of data.
I mean, at the end of the day, this is for us a huge opportunity because we need to change the way people think about kidney disease. And so, what that requires is not only data, but the ability to frame and put that data into context so that it can tell a story and tell a story that's impactful to stakeholders. And the stakeholders we're going after have different sets of values themselves. So understanding how we can use that data to show the impact of improving renal function on care, on quality, on outcomes is exciting.
Yeah, and as we get to know each other, you're an epidemiologist
By training. Yeah.
and so that's one of the few areas that really understands real world data, real data science, and so that's, I think, some of what made us align.
Well, go back to it's taken me 10 years. Like real world evidence was an exciting concept when I was graduating 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's
about time, right?
About time.
Now, you had a great analogy, the difference between data and evidence.
Yeah. So, data are words, and really the evidence is the story that can be framed by those words. And sometimes you have authors that require complicated language, and other times you can have a very effective author that can have very simple words and make a very compelling story. And that's the effect we're looking for in this IDE wrapper.
Yeah. And I love that analogy. And I like the concept that Fergus Connolly put on his website of the continuum between data and wisdom. And he said, data in and of itself is just noise. Data in context is information. Experimentation and error is experience. Information experience is knowledge. And then my favorite part is knowledge plus humility gives you wisdom.
Exactly.
And that's really, that's what I went through, learning data science as a clinician, as a surgeon. And when they asked Billy Beane in the Moneyball book, they asked him, what did it take for baseball to incorporate data science? He said, it took a certain level of humility because they all thought they were baseball experts, right? They knew every situation what the right answer was, and they had to realize they didn't. It was only through the data science principles that they could really see what was the best option, and it wasn't always what they thought as an expert. And I went through that as a hernia clinician. I thought I was, I was considered a world expert in my field in hernia disease. And I thought I knew when a patient came with a hernia, what would be the best treatment, what would be the best mesh. And as I learned data science, as I applied these principles in my own clinical practice, my eyes started opening going, oh, wow, I didn't think that. This patient may have done better without a mesh repair or whatever. And so, yeah, I kind of went through that whole process. Maybe talk a little bit about your pivotal trial and your path to commercialization, how you see that going.
Absolutely. So we're entering the building, the institution, via cardiac surgery. So this is a moment in time where the physician knows the patient is going to be at risk before they go under the knife. And our goal is to use that as an opportunity to highlight that this moment in time is clear, the risks are real, and we can mitigate those risks. Once we're in the building, then the conversation shifts to the intensivist as we expand our label and move from cardiac surgery to major surgery to then the medical ICU with sepsis and back to acute heart failure. You've really got that continuum of patients who've got the milieu of problems that lead to kidneys shutting down. And there's a lot of common ground across those that aren't apparent unless you look through and examine the data of why they're at risk and why they become exposed to dangers along the way.
Yeah. You probably wouldn't have thought there would be a hernia application, huh?
I had no idea before. But when you describe that abdominal reconstruction, you're adding multiple insults to the kidney. It's not only that you're undergoing the anesthesia and the trauma of surgery, but you're also putting both venous pressure and intra-abdominal pressure on the kidney. And it's a fragile organ. I mean, it's got the ability to recoup, and it's got the ability to, it's got a reserve so it can drive function if it needs to. But at the end of the day, it's encapsulated like the skull. And so if the pressures build up, there's nowhere for that volume to go. That volume translates to pressure and you've stopped filtering. And then that delicate balance quickly falls apart.
Yeah, and I think some of it was, as we started to do this early on, we didn't think about that kind of interaction. We focused on our thing, which is, getting everything to fit in the abdomen, get the abdominal wall closed, and
which is a little important.
Yeah, but we didn't, there's so much interconnections in our body and our organs, and it was, something I had to go through a learning process. And, like I've told you, I wish I had your technology back when I treated those patients. So we were talking about doing this real data wrapped around the IDE study. And I think we're going to see some really exciting things that can help get you to market, help other clinicians see the value and be able to understand the value, help hospitals see the value, because it's a value model. That's what we try to create, is data stories that describe value. And I can certainly see the value, less ICU stays, less dialysis, better outcomes for patients. What do you see in 2 years now is success from our project together? What do you see, or what would make this a successful project in the next couple of years?
Well, I see success won't take 2 years for this project. I see huge opportunities here because at the end of the day, kidneys are one of the few examples in medicine where there's a very profound inverse correlation between the degree of organ function and cost. We know that's because the kidneys are responsible for keeping the body's internal environment in check. It's not just filtration. Filtration is probably the least important metric in that conversation. It's what happens when the blood's been filtered and you've produced filtrate, then the kidney kicks in, and that's when it drives the energy use to selectively keep what it's supposed to keep and not keep what it needs to let go. Take the electrolytes. Electrolytes are the currency that drives neural and cardiac function. If that balance gets off, you have complications that show up that aren't kidney, but are kidney. Yeah, and you got bone metabolism. You've got a whole host of other things that could happen. Volume overload leads to, pressure on the brain, pressure on the liver, pressure on the heart, and splenectic beds. You end up with complications that aren't kidney but are. And so this project will give us an insight into how do we best capture that? How do we best quantify that and explain it to people that this is the value of keeping the kidneys in the game?
Well, I'm looking forward to it. It's really cool technology. It's really something that doesn't even exist. There's no solution other than, like we said, pray and hope for the best. And so I'm looking forward to 1 or 2 years from now when you're on the market and we can continue to use real world data to accelerate the spread of that technology and bring better value to patients and the system as a whole.
Yeah. At
Looking
the end of
forward
the
to
Yeah, at the end of the day, I would love to be in a position where we're not waiting on the sidelines anymore and can engage and change the trajectory of a lot of people's lives.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, I mean, as I've gotten to know you, that it's aligned so well with our care syntax mission and vision is improving surgical outcomes and improving value for the patient. So thank you for joining us on this episode.
Excited
I'm
to be here.
looking forward to working with you for many years to come and seeing this come to patients in the near future.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.